Hi, this is Eddie Hearn, and you're watching Lights Out.
This is Faisal Khan for Lights Out, and this is the Lights Out Boxing podcast number 33. And with me today, delighted to be joined by one of the oldest members of Team Lights Out, Mr. Asif Khan, and representing the Good Boxing Podcast, Josh Saez. Josh, good afternoon to you. Asif, good evening to you. Obviously, Josh is based all the way over in America, so we're dealing with a different time scale. Thank you for joining us. Pleasure having you guys on as always. Before we get started, just wanted to remind the viewers out there, if they haven't already, to hit the subscribe button, like, comment, and share. Follow us on all the social media platforms. And be sure to check out the Good Boxing Podcast as well. We'll be sharing their social media links and their YouTube page in the description. And yeah, let's get started because, well, we're obviously going to have to talk about the fallout from the AT&T Stadium in Texas because Saul Canelo Alvarez stopped Billy Joe Saunders at the end, well, towards the end of the 8th round. Josh, you was there. You had the privilege to be there live on Saturday night.
Yes, I was.
The build-up to it was incredible. The fight itself was really good. A heartbreaking ending, in my opinion. But Josh, we have to obviously start with the first question. And Asif, please, I'm going to have to relate it to Josh because he was there. He was, ringside. He seen it live.
Yeah.
Did Billy Joe Saunders quit?
I mean, look, I'm not gonna lie to you. I'm gonna sit here and kind of give you what I felt. Well, in the stadium, there was, I want to say, 70,000 people really rooting for Canelo. I was one of the very few people rooting for Billy Joe. I'm a really big Billy Joe fan, and I'll be honest with you, I really didn't know what happened until, like, all of a sudden, out of nowhere, Billy Joe stopped throwing punches in that round and was moving around. I'm like, oh, I guess he must have got hurt by something. He was just kind of trying to wait around to see if he could find a good shot. But in between rounds, when the fight stopped, I was kind of shocked because, like, where I was, I saw it. I was close and you saw the body language. But what you didn't see was how bad the eye was because I was under the Jumbotron, like that really big screen at Cowboy Stadium. So I really didn't get to see how bad the eye was. Upon first look, when it stopped, I was pissed off. I'm like, what the F, Billy Joe? Like, come on, like, finish it off. But then upon rewatching, that eye injury was pretty bad. And I don't think, like, based on what I saw when I rewatched it, his trainer's the one that stopped it. And his injury occurred with 1 minute left. He kept fighting. It's not like he just turned away, took a knee. He didn't really, in my opinion, quit himself. I feel like his trainer kind of, I don't want to say bailed him out, but he saw he was in bad shape. And I don't think Billy Joe himself quit. I don't know if he was looking for a way out. Everyone could say that. But in my opinion, I feel like his trainer stopped it. And look, it was a bad injury. I think the right thing was done.
As soon as that punch landed, I seen straight away, I noticed the damage it had caused. And I said at that point, because this fight's done, there's no way he's coming out in the next round. You could just tell. But as if it went off on the WhatsApp group very early in the morning UK time. You've obviously had a chance to rewatch it. You've watched several interviews. What's your thoughts on it? Because I know you have a slight opinion on it, and this is what this podcast is for. And one thing I'm not going to do is stop you from sharing your opinion. So what did you make of the ending of that fight? What's your thoughts on the whole, did he quit or did he not quit saga?
Yes, I watched it back a few times. I watched it live when it happened, and the first initial thought is, he's quit. It's got tough for him, and he's looked for a way out. But when you look back and you watch back, and you see the damage, who are we to say if he quit or not? Because it was shocking. I mean, one punch to have that effect instantly. I mean, this wasn't a case of where it swelled up over round and it got worse. Instantly, I mean, you saw, I think within 10 seconds, Canelo put his hands up because he knew he'd done some serious damage. And, listen, the emotions were running high when we were messaging in the group, and I said he quit and that, but the reasons why I said that, and I got a strong opinion about it, is because of his reaction to when Daniel Dubois got stopped. And the thing with characters like Billy Joe is they say things and they don't realize that one day they're going to come back around and bite him on the backside. And unfortunately, the first thing that happened after this fight was Twitter went mad with saying about, what he said against Daniel Dubois about, take me out on my shield or I'd rather die and all that. And that's why the emotions were high from me. But looking back from it, man, it was terrible. That punch had that effect. And yeah, who am I to say you quit or not?
When we talk about Billy Joe Saunders, we talk about a proud traveler, a guy that will literally, has got nerves of steel to fight anybody. I've never once questioned his heart or his courage, but that punch, well, is what, for me, the whole thing is, it was heartbreaking. I was heartbroken for him because I'd have rather have seen him lose on points than losing that way. Because as Asif said, he says things at times and he doesn't realize one day it could come back to bite him on the backside. But this has literally bit him on the backside, and it was tough to see. But I think looking back on the whole fight, I don't think that was Canelo's best performance, but that just shows the difference between where Billy Joe Saunders is and where an elite level fighter is in Canelo. It took him one punch to completely change that fight. And as Asif said, he raised his hands in the air. And I think even from that point, Canelo knew that this fight is done. But as you said, Asif, the criticism that he's receiving now because of the comments after the Daniel Dubois versus Joe Joyce fight, are these comments fair? Do you think the criticism that he's receiving is justified right now? Or do you think we need to look at it from a different point of view, that he's fought the best fighter in the world, he put up a very good performance, and he's just been hit by an animal, because that's what people are saying Canelo is right now.
Yeah, I think when with characters like Billy Joe, when they say stuff like that, there's going to be consequences. And unfortunately, this is a consequence. He said what he said about Daniel Dubois. He said other things in the past. He's done other things. He's a controversial person. And it's come back to bite him. But listen, some of the criticism is a bit harsh, but like I said, when he takes that approach and he's that opinionated about things and it happens to him, he's going to get compared. There are people that said, all right, well, why don't you go out on your sword? Why didn't you get knocked out? Because that's his words. I'd rather get knocked out than, go out how Daniel Dubois went. You can fight with one eye. He says these things, and now, unfortunately, I don't think he ever thought he'd come back to, hit him right in the face, and it has. But just on that shot, you said about Canelo not, he wasn't his best performance. That was calculated. I mean, that punch, it was an uppercut. Josh is the person that can break down the tactics and that. But it was, I mean, if you watch Billy Joe, the whole fight, he was throwing a punch and he was rolling under, throwing a punch and rolling under. And Canelo, he said it in the build-up. He goes, first few rounds, I'm going to work him out. I'm going to take my time and work him out. And then 8th, 9th, 10th round, he'll be done. And he's done exactly what he said, man. It was a beautiful shot.
But before, obviously, as you just said, Josh is the guy that tactically breaks down the podcast, which he will in a bit. I just want to say one thing about the criticism. What he said about the whole Daniel Dubois situation, that's something he's going to have to live with, and it's in black and blue. We've seen the video. It's been trending on all over Twitter and YouTube because of obviously what's happened to him, going back to those comments on Daniel Dubois. But I just want to say one thing, right? Since 2013, after Canelo lost to Floyd Mayweather, he's fought Golovkin twice. He's fought Amir Khan, Miguel Cotto, Danny Jacobs. He's also fought Avni Yildirim, Sergei Kovalev, Rocky Fielding, and Callum Smith. Apart from Golovkin, I don't think none of those opponents believe they could actually beat Canelo. For me, I'm a big boxing fan. I watch a lot of the build-up to any big fight these days. And watching the build-up previously to those fights, I really don't believe none of those opponents that I've just mentioned actually believed they could beat Canelo. Watching the build-up to this fight, I looked at Billy Joe Saunders and I genuinely believed he's the only one that turned up knowing he could win. And the performance-wise of Billy Joe Saunders, I thought he put in a good performance. I had him winning on my scorecards. Whether people obviously have a different opinion about it, that's entirely up to them. But that's where I'm going to give hats off to Billy Joe Saunders, because he turned up, he unsettled Canelo in a way. He did unsettle him, throughout the week. Obviously, he was playing his mind games. It didn't work. But hats off to him because he turned up. He actually had to go better than anyone else. A lot of people were saying Callum Smith would be the one to beat Canelo due to his height and his power. But that for me was probably Canelo's easiest fight in years. So hats off to Billy Joe Saunders because looking back on that performance, he turned up, he gave a good effort, he won a few rounds. Canelo struggled at times, whether you agree or not. And he actually had to go. And I'm glad that someone's got in there, had to go at Canelo. Didn't go his way, but he can come again. Josh, your thoughts on the actual fight and your thoughts on Billy Joe's performance?
I mean, truthfully, what I saw was a fighter that started to, in my opinion, I saw a fighter grow tremendously in a fight. First round, you saw he was a little nervous. You saw that the moment was big and you saw him nervous. You saw him unsettled. He never really found that rhythm until round 4 and 5. When you saw him really getting into his rhythm, you saw him countering. You saw him throwing that nice little right hook over the jab to take away the left side of Canelo, like the left jab and the left hook, right? So what I think happened was there was a few rounds where Billy Joe really felt like Canelo was substantially better than him, and it looked that way, especially in the beginning. Like round 1, I gave to Billy Joe. It was kind of like a slow round. Canelo didn't throw a lot. Billy Joe didn't throw a lot. But round 2 and 3, I saw a shift where Canelo looked to be the better fighter. And I'm like, damn it, Billy Joe, come on, man, do what you got to do. Start getting into your rhythm. Use your feints. Be Billy Joe. Don't fight with your hands up. Get into what you do. Like Billy Joe's tricky, right? He's a lefty. He's awkward, shifts, throws a bunch of punches, slides out. And then in round 4 and 5, I saw Billy Joe grow. He started to actually believe that he belonged at the world level. And that was kind of my prediction for this fight, where that was the wild card in this whole thing. Can Billy Joe really fight at the elite level? And I saw glimpses of him being able to. Like honestly, other than Canelo, who's gonna know that you're gonna break your eye socket? Like I know people are gonna say like, yeah, pick Canelo to stop him, but it was a nice uppercut he got caught with bending down into it. And you're bending fast, you go into it, you make the same move against one of the best counter punches in the world, they're going to make an adjustment. But breaking an eye socket, I know you can't, no one can legitimately say, I plan to break someone's eye the way they did. Sure, he could have, he knocked him down. Yeah, he got him with a good shot. And like you said, I feel like Billy Joe got caught with a shot. He showed that he belongs at the world level, in my opinion. I saw a lot of good things. He went hands down in front of Canelo and actually has some success. He made him look bad at certain points. Like who makes Canelo whiff the way Billy Joe did? And in my opinion, I thought he had one of the best performances against Canelo since Daniel Jacobs. And I think he did great, honestly.
Back to my point is I honestly believe, since obviously apart from Golovkin, I believe many of his opponents have turned up knowing they ain't going to win and just turned up and take a payday. And I genuinely do look back at that whole week, and Billy Joe Saunders didn't turn up just to make up the numbers or to take a payday. He thought he could beat Canelo, and that is why, for me, this is Billy Joe Saunders does belong at this level. As if you said it for many years, whenever we talked about Billy Joe Saunders, you said he's not reached the elite level yet. He's not had the elite fight. But now that we've seen him in with a Canelo, we've obviously seen the outcome. Do you think he belongs at that level, or is it the level that's just beneath him that he belongs at?
See, the way I look at it is I think there's world level, and then I think there's Canelo level. I think Canelo is in a level of his own. I don't think there's anyone boxing at this moment that is even close to Canelo. And Billy Joe, is he a world level fighter? 100%. But the problem is Canelo is above that. And I know what you say, Faisal, about people come and they don't come to win. I think people watch Canelo and they think they can solve the puzzle. And I only think it's when they get in there they realize that this puzzle is unsolvable. I found it remarkable, that Canelo threw more punches than Billy Joe. He outpunched him. He threw a lot more punches than him. When you watch the fight, you think Billy Joe's throwing a lot of punches, Canelo's hardly throwing anything. The guy's just he's in an elite class of his own. So in answer to your question, Billy Joe, is he a world level fighter? 100%, but Canelo is a level above that.
And I hate to interject really quick. I really do believe also the fact that Billy Joe's first elite fighter was Canelo. So like you got to cut him a little slack.
Yeah, 100%.
it's like your
Josh, do you
first
think?
time.
I was gonna say, do you think that that played a massive part? Because the level of boxers that Billy Joe's fought, I don't think he's fought a world class fighter, and I think it's a
Exactly.
the inactivity one. I mean, when was the last time he fought? Is it maybe close to 2 years ago?
No. He fought
No,
last
he fought,
December when he beat Martin
yeah.
Murray.
Okay, but again, Martin Murray my hand's gone off the screen because Canelo's all the way up there. He hasn't been in the mix, and I think it was a massive jump, for him to make. And unfortunately, he come just a bit short. Yeah, 100%, man. The heart was there. He won a lot of fans over. Fessa, I'm not a big fan of Billy Joe, but he won me over that night. I just hope we see him again. I know we're going to go into it, but
It is. Do you know what it is? Right, you look at it, and I think you hit the nail on the head there. That was his first elite fight. Is that But then again, you have to ask yourself the question. Did the last 3 or 4 years when he should have been fighting the Golovkins, the Danny Jacobs, was he taking his career serious at that point? Was he being managed properly? All these questions they play a massive part in obviously the aftermath of a fight, especially when you fight the pound for pound king in Canelo. But to go into that fight at 30 years of age, knowing that it's going to be the first real fight when the whole world is watching. I know people talk about his great performance against David Lemieux and the rivalry with Chris Eubank, but they're at that level. They're not at that top elite level. But I do honestly think, and I'm not saying it because I'm a big Billy Joe Saunders fan, I actually thought he done better than even I expected. And I'm glad he went in there with that attitude where I'm not here just to make up the numbers. I'm here to win. You even seen it in the press conference in the face-off where he was saying to Canelo, you ain't ever fought anybody like me. I'm here to win. I'm not going to bow down to you like the rest of your opponents have. And I think that's needs to be the attitude of other fighters that fight Canelo from now on. Because as good as Canelo is, everybody in boxing is beatable. Even the best are beatable. Apart from Floyd Mayweather, of course. But I do think genuinely one day there will be a fighter out there that will beat Canelo. Again, you have to look at Billy Joe Saunders. He's a southpaw and he's got good foot movement. Canelo in the past struggled against the likes of the Austin Trouts, the Laras with southpaws and good foot movements, which is why I genuinely believe Billy Joe Saunders would have won the fight. But Canelo Alvarez, he said what he said in the build-up to the fight, and he backed it up. He stopped him towards the end of the fight. And with one punch, it wasn't a barrage of punches, it was just one uppercut, and it was a horrendous uppercut, and it's badly damaged Billy Joe Saunders. Guys, where do you see Billy Joe Saunders' future lying in boxing? Can he come back? Can he return? Can he become a world champion, or do you think this is the end of Billy Joe?
Do you know what? If this would have happened at any other fight, I'd probably say there's a way back for him. But it's happened at that elite level, right? So what's the desire now? What he's been paid massively, probably his biggest payday to date. He's been a world champion at 2 different weight classes. What is the desire now? And we're not even talking about how bad this injury is, because it looked horrendous. What's coming out of the media even suggests it's even more worse than what we initially thought. Has he got that desire? Has he got that mentality? Has he got that will to get back and think that he can be back at the top? And at 30, 31, I don't know, man. I don't think so. If it was against a Chris Eubank Jr. or Martin Murray that this injury happened, then yeah, because he's got something to aim for. But what is there for him to try and accomplish? I hope we see him again, but I don't think we will. If I'm being honest, I don't.
As we mentioned, Josh, it's the first time we've seen him at the elite level. If you look at 168, Caleb Plant, Benavidez, Callum Smith, Danny Jacobs, 160, Golovkin, Andrade, Murata, Jaime Munguia, there's still big fights left for Billy Joe Saunders. The Eubank Jr. rematch is still a big fight. Can he come back? Do you think he still can come back into the sport and fight at that elite level?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Billy Joe, his injury, of course, if the doctor says, hey, you should never fight again, then you kind of take it what the doctor says seriously. But I truthfully think he'll be back. Again, losing to Canelo, getting hit with the uppercut that just happens to break your eye socket is something that can happen to anybody. I do think he could come back. And look, Billy Joe has skills to fight with anybody. you're not going to fight a million Canelos. He stepped up, he lost, he took a shot, he gave a great account for himself. I don't think, truthfully, I think Billy Joe would do best at 160. I think he can make 160. And at 160, there are really not that many people that I feel would give Billy Joe that much of a problem. I think Billy Joe beats Charlo, honestly, at 160. You saw what Korobov did, so Charlo, he made him look really bad. So I think Billy Joe can move. He can catch up to Charlo and give him fits all night. I also think right now at this juncture, you shouldn't fight Triple G until you know that eye is okay. But I think Billy Joe would definitely beat Triple G. Triple G's slow. I don't know if him and I forget the guy he's working with now. I always confuse it. It's not Adam Booth, right? It's
Who, Billy Joe Saunders trainer?
Jonathan. No. Triple G's working with Jonathan Banks, right?
Yes, Jonathan Banks.
Okay. I don't think him and Jonathan Banks are a really good matchup in my opinion. I feel like Triple G is not a finesse kind of defensive fighter. Abel Sanchez brought out the best in Triple G because he knew what Triple G was, and he kind of hedged the fact that he was just like a strong puncher, hands up, very methodical. He knew what he was. Now they're trying to teach him angles and be this defensive first fighter, and it's just too late in Triple G's career. So I think Billy Joe can fight Triple G and do well. You know how I feel about Andrade. I don't think Andrade is is all that good. I think Billy Joe could fight Andrade and wouldn't come out the fight hurt. I mean, even if he were to lose. So in my opinion, I think Billy Joe can definitely stick around. And even at 168, Callum Smith is moving up, so he's no longer an option. You can fight. You got Daniel Jacobs. You can get back in, who's in the same stable as is he still with DAZN Matchroom? Daniel Jacobs. Yeah. So you still have that top. I mean, they're not the best of the best. They're not Canelo, but how many Canelos are out there? Honestly,
there's reports circulating around that Callum Smith is moving up to light heavyweight, and also Daniel Jacobs is moving up to light heavyweight. And Eddie Hearn said in one of his interviews that he wants to make the Daniel Jacobs versus Joe Smith Jr. at light heavyweight. Very interesting to see how Daniel Jacobs gets on at light heavyweight, especially on the back of that last performance against Gabe Rosado, a guy that knows. Yes,
that was such a bad fight.
A guy that knows Billy Joe Saunders well, that trained with him, and for me, got the best out of him, is Dominic Ingle. Now, Dominic Ingle, all over his Instagram, done a Q&A, and he was asked on numerous of occasions, what is Billy Joe Saunders' best weight? Where does he belong at? On many occasions, Dominic Ingle's response was at 160. Asif, you said there's world elite level, but then there's Canelo. Golovkin, do you put him in that same bracket with Canelo, or is that a fight that Billy Joe Saunders needs to be targeting within the next 18 months if he is to come back and if he has fully recovered from this eye injury?
Yeah, it's that question, isn't it? If he's gonna recover from the eye injury, how bad is the eye injury, and would you want to put him in with a monster like Triple G? I know he's getting on a bit, but he's still Triple G. If there's any one fighter you wouldn't want to put him in after Canelo, it's probably Triple G. So I like the Andrade fight. There's a bit of needle there. They were meant to fight, and I said there's a bit of needle there. And Josh makes a great point. Even if he did lose that fight, he probably wouldn't come out hurt. And that it's just how bad this injury is, man. I'm worried that we haven't really heard anything other than that he's had surgery. You hope it's not bad, but you look at the past and see the injuries that some boxers have had. And look, Daniel Dubois has a bad injury, but he's making a comeback. The other one was it a go-go?
Kell Brooks had 2 broken eye sockets.
Yeah,
a go-go's had an eye injury.
But Kell Brook was an eye injury, and then, in my opinion, maybe rushed him back a bit too quick and put him in with someone they shouldn't have. And that's the risk with Billy Joe. So, again, I think it's all about the desire, man. I don't question one bit that he doesn't mix with these guys. Of course he does. It's the desire now. Does he want to get back? We'll see.
What next for Canelo? That's obviously the question. Eddie Hearn said after the fight that they want the undisputed clash with Caleb Plant, and rightfully so. Listen, he holds 3 belts. I don't believe we've ever had a undisputed super middleweight champion before, but Canelo is the face of boxing right now. I did a bit of a poll on Twitter the other day, and the response I got is everybody wants a third fight with Triple G. Asif says he's getting on a bit, but he's also a world champion at middleweight. Caleb Plant holds the final piece of the jigsaw up at super middleweight. Josh, what fight are you making next if you're Eddie Hearn and you want to make a few $1 million? Who would you put him in with next? Bear in mind, there was a bit of a dispute with Andrade in the press conference after the fight. You know, you've got Edgar Berlanga, who's been calling for everybody up at 160 and 168. Let's not fall asleep on Benavidez. And let's not forget the fact that many people have said before, if Canelo is to lose, it will be against a Bivol or a Beterbiev. What is the next move for the pound-for-pound king right now?
I mean, he has his mind set on undisputed. Clearly, getting all the belts is kind of the mantra for 2021. I mean, Teofimo Lopez set the pace. You got Ramirez and Josh Taylor looking to be undisputed. It just seems like the flavor of the year. People want to just unify all the belts and just be undisputed, second to none in a weight class. So it makes sense. You fight Caleb Plant, you get all the belts, and then you kind of figure out whether or not you want to fight an Andrade or if you want to fight a Benavidez, which I think Benavidez probably right now out of everyone left has the best shot, but he doesn't have a belt, and unfortunately he gave up his belt the wrong way. I mean, he had a belt and he got stripped. It was a dumb reason, but at this point I just think Caleb Plant's the fight. You get it done. It's a big fight. Everyone knows that it's for undisputed, and it's a very big fight for the masses. Like, you can sell it completely, all the belts, 4 fights. You got PBC who's willing to work with anyone. It just, in my opinion, makes sense. I feel like Andrade, I almost felt like he was a fan when he did that whole thing with Canelo. Like, honestly, think about it. I saw him at the fight too. He was like 2 or 3 rows away from me. And I'm telling you, no one knows who this guy is. There were a few people like, oh, who's that guy taking photos with everyone? And they were like, oh, is he a singer? Is he like a rapper? I'm like, no, he's actually the super middleweight champion the middleweight champion of the world looking to fight Canelo. And he had that stupid shirt on. It was, I'm sorry, he looked like a clown in that whole thing. I know I don't really like him too much because of his whole demeanor. I respect him as a fighter, but he has to stop with this. Canelo's afraid of him. Come on, man. He's like trying to be undisputed champion. Get out of here.
Listen, Canelo's for everybody. And how old is he? What, 30, 31? He's a 4-weight world champion. I don't think he's scared of anybody. He'd fight 4. The guy said it himself. He wants another 2 fights this year. You know, which world champion do you know fights 4 times? And let's not forget, he fought in December against Callum Smith. You know, look, regardless of what people say about him, he is a credit to the sport, and he really is a role model for the younger generation. And when he does call it a day, he goes up there with the elite. We obviously will move on from this because it is going to be interesting to see what the next steps are with Canelo, but also Billy Joe Saunders. We're going to read a few of our questions out from the Q&A we did on Instagram. I didn't obviously reveal them in the transcript because I wanted to catch you boys when you least expected it. First question was from Wav17, which is Montel, who is part of Lights Out. Shout out to Montel for answering one of the questions, throwing in a question for the guys. Relate this one to Asif. Asif, Wavs, aka Montel, says, what 3 fights do you think need to happen as soon as possible?
Obviously, the most obvious one is the Joshua and Fury one, which I was hoping would get announced, but hasn't. Maybe this week. You know me, I'm a big, massive Dylan White fan. Him and the Bronze Bomber.
I like that fight.
And then the third one is obviously the Crawford and the Errol Spence. They're obvious fights. Will they happen? I hate the fact that UFC, man, they make all these 50-50 fights and boxing fans get left waiting for years and years. And you get a Mayweather and Canelo fight when Mayweather's at an age and Mayweather and Pacquiao fight where they're both past their peak. And out of them 3 fights, I'm hoping we get to see all 3 of them whilst they're in their prime.
My answer to that is, Asif, of what you just said about UFC is already making these big fights. Take away half the belts and take away most of these governing bodies, and I guarantee you see these fights happen. UFC is run by one guy, that's Dana White. Boxing, you got Al Heyman, you got Rich Chafer, you got Bob Arum, you got Frank Warren, you got Eddie Hearn. There's too many politics involved in the sport, but thanks for the question, Montel. Asif, good answer. Do you know what? Out of all 3, I'd love to see White versus White. Forget the fight. White Wilder, the press conference for me would be entertaining as hell. And how Wilder's looking under Malik Scott right now, if you follow him on Instagram, it's going to be interesting. He looks as if he's made a few changes, but anyone can hit the mitts and look like a modern day Muhammad Ali. Next question's for you, Josh Saez, from Danny_18FZ. He goes, should Billy Joe Saunders consider moving up to light heavyweight?
Absolutely not. I mean, Billy Joe Saunders, in my opinion, looked as lean as he could at 168, and like he looked ripped, but he made the weight pretty comfortably. And at 175, you're fighting guys that substantially are bigger than you, and the power gap is just different. I mean, Canelo at 168 looks pretty solid, but if you look at him physically, yes, he's comfortable, but you know his optimum weight is 160, and he's a smaller 168 pounder, in my opinion. He looks good. I'm not gonna sit here and say that. But at 175, Bivol and all these guys that are huge, the better Biev would break his other eye socket. I mean, let's be honest. He gets hit by those guys. It's just not gonna be, in my opinion, a good campaign for him at 175. I personally think Billy Joe at 160, like Dominic Ingle said, that's his perfect weight. He's fast, he's agile, and the power gap is just different. I mean, Canelo isn't the biggest one-punch knockout artist. He's fast, he's sharp, but at 175, you have some guys that they can hit. I mean, even Kovalev catches him. It's some problems for Billy Joe.
Interesting to see, because I remember, I think in 2018, Kovalev was scheduled to fight. I can't remember who. His opponent pulled out. He put something on Twitter. Billy Joe Saunders retweeted it with a comment, said, I would be willing to jump up and fight anybody at light heavyweight if the money is right. So listen, if the money's right, let's not rule it out. Oh, look, Canelo at light heavyweight.
No, but I think after this whole thing where he was talking about Daniel Dubois, he's going to chill with those kind of statements.
Preferably. Asif, Umar Amir.Udin. Have British fighters been affected before? Sorry, have British fighters been affected fighting behind closed doors?
In what sense? What are we talking about?
As in, well, that's the question. I'd have to relate it to fighters like Josh Warrington, Josh Kelly, fighters that thrive off of the crowd.
Okay. Well, yeah. I mean, the two fighters you just mentioned there, have Josh Warrington won. I mean, the guy lives off the fans, the Leeds fans, and you saw his performance. There's other fighters as well that they thrive off the fans. I think Derek Chisora is one of them as well. I know he put in a good performance against Joseph Parker, but I think if you had 20, 30,000 fans screaming, Chisora's name, I think he would have put in that extra 10 or 20% that he needed to get the win. So, yeah, I think the answer to that, you saw what fans bring to an event, and Josh will probably tell us, honestly, watching
Insanity.
that, it looked unreal. It looked like a spectacle. It looked like something out of a movie. And yeah, I mean, I can't wait to get fans
I agree with you.
back in the UK.
Josh, final question. I'm going to relay this one to you. Eddie Davis 10. Who wins at heavyweight? A prime Muhammad Ali versus a prime Tyson Fury?
Oh man, this is
the press conference would be brilliant, honestly.
It really would, but I personally think there's not a heavyweight out there that would give Tyson Fury fits other than Tyson Fury. I mean, he's a freak show, super long, and I love Muhammad Ali, but you're talking about someone that's 6'9" and 286 pounds. Muhammad Ali was great for his era, and is an all-time great. Good boxing skills, good reflexes. But Tyson Fury moves like no other heavyweight in history, in my opinion. And how is Muhammad Ali going to come in? He's going to come in with his hands down. Tyson Fury is going to jab and grab him all night. He's too big. If he gets on the inside, he'll just tie him up, turn him, push him against the ropes, and then just keep resetting him. And it's no disrespect to Muhammad Ali, because he's an all-time great. But you're not going to rope-a-dope Tyson Fury. He's too smart of a boxer, and he's okay with boxing around the ring. And I just have a funny story, and I was actually going to share this on my podcast. I was coming back, had a couple drinks in my hand, some popcorn, and I'm walking, and I get bumped by like a group, and I almost dropped my popcorn. And like we had a couple drinks. I was with my wife on a vacation. I got kind of upset, and I turned around, I'm like, what the F? And it's Tyson Fury and Tommy Fury and his whole gang. And I go, okay, I'm going to keep walking. And then like a mob of people come by and start running our way, because I had no idea Tyson Fury and Tommy were such big celebrities. Like I've heard of them, but they're really big time in the US. So at that point, I look up and I'm like, I'm 6'4", and I see somebody 6'9", 286 pounds. I'm like, oh man, this guy's gonna kick my ass over here in Texas Stadium. I'm gonna cap the Gypsy Kings and beat the hell out of me. But
I think the answer to that question is the fans definitely win, but obviously we won't get to see it.
Yeah,
but
for
some
sure.
great questions. Thank you guys for getting your questions in, and hopefully during next week's podcast we'll have a few more questions to ask the guys. That's all we've got time for on today's podcast. Asif, Josh, pleasure as always. People out there, make sure you hit that subscribe button if you haven't already. Make sure you follow us on all the social media platforms. Check out the Good Boxing podcast as well. We will be sharing their links in the description as well. And hopefully, as Asif said, we'll get an announcement soon to discuss Fury versus Joshua when it does get announced, because that is the one fight I really want to see out of the three you really mentioned. Asif, Josh, pleasure as always. And guys, thank you out there for listening to the Lights Out Boxing podcast.